Hello everyone, and welcome to this next session of the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm really excited about what we're going to learn today with Chef Rob Connoley, if I can pronounce his name correctly without stumbling over everything. Before we jump into the demonstration and introduction, I want to just remind you of a couple of things. Even though the festival is quickly winding down, if you are looking for the schedule, you can find it at festival.si.edu for any changes and updates. We've had some weather-related things over the last few days, so keep that in mind. I also want to take a moment and thank the sponsors of the Ozarks program specifically for helping make this possible. It is produced in partnership with Missouri State University and is supported in part by Missouri Division of Tourism, Arkansas Tourism, University of Arkansas, Experience Fayetteville, the Wingate Foundation, the Committee of 100 for the Ozark Folk Center, Ozark Beer Company, Crystal Ridges Art and Social Impact Accelerator Partnership, and the Missouri Folk Arts Program. The program received federal support from the Latino Initiatives Pool, administered by the National Museum of the American Latino, the Asian Pacific American Initiatives Pool, administered by the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, and the Smithsonian American Women's History Initiatives Pool. In-kind support comes from Montana Cans and Mountain Valley Spring Water. And just as a reminder, the festival goes until 5:30 tonight, but we actually have both an evening concert and a square dance that are two different events that are going to happen after that. So if you're interested, you might want to consider staying around for one or both of those things. But all those things said, we'll get to the real reason that we're here. I want to do a very brief introduction of Chef Connolly and turn it over to him. So I'm very excited to jump in and hear more about what he has to say today. Very brief version of his very impressive bio is that he is a chef, master forager, and 3-time James Beard Award semi-finalist. He is also the owner and chef of Bulrush, a contemporary zero-waste restaurant in St. Louis, focused on serving Ozark-themed cuisine made from hyper-local, hyper-seasonal ingredients. Part of its mission is to use food to educate guests about Indigenous, enslaved, and Euro-Appalachian people who have historically shaped Ozark's cuisine. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Chef Connolly, who's going to talk about sorghum today, and we're very excited to hear about that.
Yeah, I'm talking about sorghum, but let's be honest. I'm going to do the most controversial thing you can do in Ozark or Southern cooking. I'm making cornbread. You're going to argue with me and say, there's no sugar in cornbread, or there's no... Eat my cornbread and tell me it's not good, okay? So you can argue with me because I actually love hearing everyone's versions of that real basic dish, right? Pretty much everyone here, I'm assuming, has made cornbread. So we're going to do that first, and there's a QR code on the back of the chair in front of you. That's how you can get not only these recipes, but all the recipes being shared for the festival with all the different chefs. So feel free to pull those up. The ones you're looking for today are a sheet that says collard greens, cornbread, and sorghum butter. Because we just slaughtered a pig right before this, we're also going to throw in a little pork tenderloin. That's the good news. Now the bad news for those of you who haven't been to one of these cooking demos yet is you don't get any of the food. These are park rules, not our rules, but I would encourage you to come up, get smells. If a piece of pork tenderloin leaves my plate, you're not going to hurt my feelings, but that's not allowed, okay? So, on the cornbread, if you're following along, we've done some of this work in advance just to keep things moving and it's hot. And again, you can look up at the mirror to see what's happening down below. I've got a number of ingredients already in here, and I've got something in here that's not part of your recipe set, and I'd love to talk about it if anyone's interested. But we have the cornmeal. This is a locally, freshly ground cornmeal. We have the all-purpose flour. For those of you who are gluten-free, I've done this with gluten-free mix 1,000 times. Not only is it as good, I kind of think it's better. It has a crispness that rice flour gives to it. There's also sugar, that's the controversy, salt, and baking powder and baking soda. Ratios on your QRs. If you can see the dark powder though, the dark powder is acorn. This is acorn flour. If anyone cares, it's a burr oat. That's all I gather for the restaurant. And this is stuff that we process in-house. We do about 200 pounds of acorn flour every year. And you have acorns sitting right around wherever you live. I don't care where you live. And it's a bountiful, nutritious food source. So I hope some of you might have interest in learning how to process acorns and work it into your food. This is a real good example. So with these dries, I'm just going to mix them up, make sure mostly that the leaveners, the baking powder, baking soda, are mixed in there. And then we have some liquids. Now, if I'm being fussy at the restaurant, I'm going to pre-whisk all this. But at home, I don't do that because I've got to do the dishes. So I'm just going to put 3 eggs right in. They're not even mixed up yet. This is buttermilk and a little bit of regular milk to thin it out. And what I do at home is I just whisk that without whisking up the dries. And now the eggs, if you can see, are pretty well mixed already. And now I can be a little more aggressive and get this mixed up. All right, if my helper could bring the skillet. So this is a technique thing. I don't know who does this at home. I can't imagine doing it any other way. We have an oven in back right now set at 500. We've got the skillet, the cast iron skillet in there. I threw a stick of butter. At home, I might not do a whole stick, but I like butter in my cornbread. Here it comes, scalding hot, don't even walk away. If you can see in there, that butter's browned a little bit. It's super hot. I'm gonna pour this straight in. It's gonna sizzle. And the butter gets pushed all the way up the sides of the pan. I don't fuss with the batter. Now this can go back in. We'll drop it in the oven to 375, 35 minutes. It's the only way to make cornbread. If you're doing Jiffy cornbread, bless you on your journey. Now, I was raised on Jiffy bread, so I'm not knocking it because we were raised on that, what was it, 25 cents? I think I kind of remember 10 cents a box. I know I remember 25 cents a box. But Jiffy is like the easiest thing, but there's that chemical taste in there. You can't control the leavening and the type of cornmeal. So, you saw how fast this was. That wasn't even 5 minutes. And in the winter, especially when you want to warm up your kitchen, this is great. In the summer when it's 100 degrees out, I'm glad I'm here and not back there. All right, that's done. We'll see that in a second. One of the things I want to talk about through all these dishes, though, is sorghum. And I do encourage you to ask questions throughout. You don't need to wait till the end, because by the end, I want to eat my food, you want to get a drink. And so feel free to just raise your hand, and we have folks who will help get the questions out. Who here knows what sorghum is? I'm not going to put you on the spot. I just want to know who knows. Not many people, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 of you. Oftentimes people think sorghum molasses. They think it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. The sorghum plant and the sugarcane plant are both in the same scientific family. They're both a grass. And we process them the same, that we squeeze the juice out. If you've ever been to I don't know, a Whole Foods or a hippie co-op that presses wheatgrass, it's the same idea. We take the liquid out of the grass, squeeze it, but instead of just drinking it raw, on sugarcane and sorghum, we boil it down. We boil the water out, concentrates the sugars. The sugars, if you're going to take my picture, let me know so I can suck my gut. Thanks. And I can't hold it in that long. And those sugars will caramelize. All right. The difference between them is a plant, but the flavor is vastly different at that beginning phase. So once it's boiled down, once you have the syrup, which we either call molasses or sorghum syrup, then molasses is already that muddy, heavy flavor that you're used to. But sorghum has a vegetal, fresh flavor. It's herbal. It's lighter, and the color's lighter, and there's a tang to it, almost a citrus to it. Once you can sorghum, about 2 weeks later, it goes to that similar muddy flavor. It's not quite the same, but it's more similar. And that's that extra level of cooking that happens when you can it. There's a long, long tradition going way back to the early, or the late 19th century, that when sorghum's pressed, which around southern Missouri is late October, there's a special meal that's created. They'll eat it day after day after day. And it's country ham, collard greens, maybe poke if it's around, and cornbread. And then you do what we're going to do next. That was a long intro too. I'm going to throw a little sorghum and some butter. Because you wouldn't normally just do sorghum. You might do that in biscuits, but really we're looking at the sorghum and butter. Can I get some spoons? Thanks. And so this is just regular grocery store butter, nothing fancy. This is sorghum that I brought from Missouri. This one came from an Amish family north of Springfield, Missouri. The other one that I like to buy is down near Sykeston. Sykeston is in the Boot Hill of Missouri. That's not technically the Ozarks, so I want to bring you the real stuff. And the guy in Sykeston's realized he can distill his sorghum juice. And he's making a lot more money, thank you. Making a lot more money distilling it than making the syrup. So to make sorghum butter, you see how that butter's already soft in this weather? Of course it is. And this is salted butter. If you do unsalted, you can just add a little salt in. And mix it. It's whatever ratio. Come on, this is not rocket science. This is the easy part. And now we have sorghum butter. Okay, we're going to put this aside, come back to it, and let's get to collard greens. Now, yeah, please. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, that is a really good question. Okay, any other questions? You know, I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that. For those of you who didn't hear, she was asking if there's a similar glycemic index between sorghum and sugarcane. And I don't know that the question's about the plant. It's the processing and the concentration of sugar would be my guess. Okay, yeah, please.
Do you use acorn flour as a substitute for all kinds of regular wheat flour?
Yes and no. So the answer is really no. The question was, for those of you who might not have heard, do I substitute acorn for all wheat flours, or can I substitute it? And when I was thinking about this dish in particular, it worked great. I can't do a sourdough or a light Pullman's loaf or a white bread. It's too heavy for that because it's not flour. There's no gluten. It's a nut meal that I grind in. So when I make it, I normally, over the years, I've figured these percentages out, but I'll take a percentage of the flour out, put some acorn flour back in, but then I have to adjust the leavener to lighten it up a little bit more. I do a lot of baked goods with acorn, but it's never exclusively acorn. I used to live in southern New Mexico, and there's a couple of tribal communities that use a lot of acorn, and they will often make cookies and flatbreads, and those are pure acorn. Those, from a flavor perspective, are really challenging for a lot of people, but also they're just dense. I make acorn tortillas all the time, and same thing. There's no leavener, so it's okay. So the answer is you need to play with the percentages, and you can, but it's never a complete substitution. That absolutely does not work. Okay, and I'm going to now back off and say, I do a lot with gluten-free mix, because as a chef I'm always serving gluten-free folks, and gluten-free mix is mostly white rice, brown rice, sorghum flour, and some other things, and so it would be easy to work acorn starch into a gluten-free mix at a pretty heavy level, and just make sure that you have some of the other gluten-free ingredients to help for whatever they were in there for, whether it's for rice, it's the spring and the stickiness, that kind of thing. It'd be fun to play with. That's not my restaurant. We're busy enough. Okay, so... Oh, I thought that was... I think that's someone else. All right, so we're going to do collard greens next. And collard greens are another one. Some of y'all from the area are going to be like, oh no, we don't put that in our collard greens. But what we have is basic grocery store collard greens. I've got them chopped up. Of course, they've already been rinsed. And I'm going to drop them in with the heat before it gets too hot here. A little bit of oil. Now, are there people here, be honest, that don't like collard greens? Don't like your bitter greens? you can be honest. I serve a lot of them at my restaurant, and I get a lot of looks. They're like, I'm paying how much in this fine dining restaurant? You're getting collard greens. I'm like, just relax. The collard greens will be okay. And so the way I do mine, even though I like bitter, salty collard greens, pork fat, I do a few things. So let's start with, here's some stock. This is chicken stock. It can be vegetable stock. It can be any kind. And some of the sorghum. I like sweetener, but not just straight sugar, not brown sugar. That's too much. So here's some of the sorghum going in. And for me, my spices are cayenne. I like a little heat to it or not. I've done smoked paprika many times in there too. Salt. I salt heavy because I'm a restaurant. You know what? People are always like, restaurants oversalt their food. Yeah, we do. Because we taste food constantly that's salty, we get numb to it. We're aware of it, but we also know that salt tastes good. All right, and then a piece of garlic. Have to show that I actually know how to cook instead of just dumping things in the pan. I don't really, because I'm using this huge knife on this little bit of garlic, and I have people who do this for me at a restaurant. Okay. Drop the garlic in. Please use fresh. And stuff out of the bottle is ridiculous. All right. And I'm doing these in this order because the collard greens are going to take a minute. The cornbread's going to take a minute. And you need to pay attention to the pork, which is what I'm going to do last. As soon as this comes to a simmer, I'm going to just put a lid on it, drop the heat a little bit, and then we're going to get that liquid out of the pan at the very, very end. Kind of basic stuff. I say basic, I don't know how much cooking experience y'all have. Okay, it's already going, got the lid on, turning it down. Wish me luck. It's clicking and doing all sorts of stuff. Okay, so for those of you who weren't here at the previous one, we just butchered a whole hog in the past couple hours. And so this is about as fresh as it's going to get. This is the tenderloin. They let me have the best piece. And so one of the things that happens with pork like this is people don't think about the cook time. The thicker end's going to take longer to cook than the thinner end, right? And so at the restaurant, what we do very first is we're going to break it into maybe 2/3, 1/3 here. This smaller piece, that becomes food for staff. And then we take the bigger piece. Now, hopefully at home, you'll take the time to clear all this off, especially what's called the silver skin. Don't watch me while I do this. This is not my knife. This is a good time for questions. Because I don't want to lose a finger, but I can talk. It's not fat at all. It's the connective tissue between the muscles. And so, like that was a big chunk of fat that I just took off. But now I'm going to come in and get this one more piece of fat. And now we get to the silver skin. Because in fact, the fat is much more edible than the silver skin. If you look at the skin that I just came under, the silver skin, I can't rip it. I mean, I can if I get forceful, but so if I can't even rip this, we can't eat it. This is the stuff people have to spit out. So I'm going to keep cleaning it up. The silver skin will be even more apparent.
Topic from what you're doing at this moment, but if you're in a mood for questions, can you talk a little bit about how you got interested in Ozarks food? For folks who may not be super familiar with Missouri geography, St. Louis is not technically in the Ozarks. It is, connected with it, not that far away, but it is kind of a different region of the state. So I'm curious about that backstory.
Yeah, and did I hear a question over here? Okay, I did. Because I won't. Beef? Well, that's a fun story that connects to that question, actually. We only serve things that we have documentation of being raised, grown, eaten in the Ozarks. Now, that doesn't sound like anything important, but just know that the first year and a half that we were open, we did not serve beef. Because all of my research was in the interior, the mountainous parts of the Ozarks, where in the 19th century, they wouldn't have had beef. And in fact, I'm wearing a pig breeder's shirt right now, because pork is what was predominant. And wild game, of course. It's only when I kept, so, let me back up. Bulrush is contemporary interpretation of historic Ozark cuisine. For us, we look at the late 18th, early 19th century of the Ozarks, because that's the point in time when indigenous people first encountered the settlers. Settlers often would bring enslaved individuals, and those three cultures are the ones who create synergy that leads to the food that we eat today. We very quickly acknowledge indigenous people were there for millennia before, but what we look for is what we're eating now and where that came from. And so, when I say that, I'm very contaminated. No one died from what I'm serving here. You can see it now, Smithsonian food poisoning outbreak. Don't eat this. So, the research I do is archival. I look at letters and journals. I'm aware that not everything is written word. And so we work directly with the Osage Nation's Office of Historic Preservation, Dr. Andrea Hunter, and she shares information with me. And then we also do genealogy of known freed, enslaved individuals. That information is coming from it's called the slave narrative from the 1920s, 1930s. It was a WPA era project where they interviewed living freed, enslaved individuals. And so what we do with that information is we've done genealogy work and have all living descendants of 3 individuals identified as a family tree, and we're in conversation with those families then to tell their story about food ways. Okay, now that you know why I'm talking about any of this stuff, I can get back to the question. So we knew immediately about game animals, we knew immediately about pork, and in fact we know what breed of pork, because this is the turn of the 19th century, and refrigeration didn't exist yet. And so they would do mostly guinea hog. Guinea hog is a really small pig. Guinea hogs range from 40 to 70 pounds. They can get a little bigger if you fatten them up. But they did guinea hogs because it was a friendly breed, and you could travel them to get to the homestead. And if it was time to put one down, you cure the 2 hams, you cure the bacon, you boil the head so you get your head cheese, and then you eat the loins, the ribs, whatever else. And so there's not waste and there's no need for storage. This is a long way to get to. Only when we expanded our research, which is never ending, and we're looking at Springfield, Missouri, did we start finding cattle ranches. Once there's cattle ranches, I literally picked up my phone, called my sous chef who was back in St. Louis, and said, get beef on the menu. And we did. That's been the same with a lot of animals. Fish are another one that's really interesting, because we had heard through the research that trout were introduced in the 1950s in the sports fishing movement, and we hadn't seen any documentation to suggest that wasn't the case. And so we were focused in on suckers and catfish and walleye, interestingly. And then we worked with the University at Rolla, Missouri, and they have a research station down on the Arkansas border, and it's an old trout fishery from the 1890s. And so, same thing, I called my sous chef, I said, get some trout in, let's start using it. So we're a quirky restaurant that way. That's the long answer to yes, we serve beef. And that was a perfect question for me to get all that silver skin off this. It doesn't have to be perfectly beautiful, but it's nice and clean. There might be a few little strands, but this will be perfectly edible. Okay, your question. Why St. Louis? That's not quite what you asked, but I can't charge the prices I need to do the work I do if I'm not in a big city. We do big city prices, and so that's why I'm there. My family, I'm born and raised St. Louis. My family's all from St. Genevieve. I don't know if you know St. Genevieve. It's the oldest European settlement west of the Mississippi, except for Santa Fe. And my family is from St. Genevieve since the 1830s. That also is not the Ozarks, technically. But St. Genevieve and then St. Louis later became the gateways into the Ozarks. So that culture makes a lot of sense to go through. And a lot of folks that you're going to talk to during this festival will have different definitions of what Ozarks even is or are. And to me, yes, there's the geographic feature, which technically is the answer, it was the Ozarks. But to me, it's cultural. And so St. Genevieve, which most people think of as French, most of us from there think of as German, is not Ozark culture. We don't celebrate Ozark culture. We celebrate French or German. All right. Was that even close to your question?
Partially, yes. I was also just curious as to, given those factors, how you became interested initially in this type of cuisine.
So, like I said, born and raised in St. Louis, and I've been gone about 18 years. My mom just got to an age it's time to come back, and that was about 6 or 7 years ago. And so I moved back, and these days chefs like to explore the food of their childhood. Is anyone from St. Louis or knows St. Louis? Because this joke will not make sense to anyone else. My childhood is Bridgeton in the 1980s. This is the airport community. There's really no deep cultural roots to be digging in to build a restaurant around. But at the time, I thought, well, I could go check out St. Genevieve. That could be cool. But I don't know, man. No one really wants to go eat a bunch of heavy German food in a fine dining restaurant. Don't get me wrong. I like my sausage. I can't live without my potatoes. But I don't want to do a restaurant around that. And so, interestingly, at that time, by the way, salt heavy on my pork, which is about to go in the skillet. The skillet's not too hot. I want to see the oil ripple. And at the time, my spouse was doing work down in the Ozarks with churches. He's essentially a bishop, and so he's working with churches down there. And I said, you know what? Ask the little ladies for the church cookbook. They'll be thrilled that anyone wants it, and I might find something useful. I didn't. I have a lot of church cookbooks from the 70s, 80s, and 90s down the Ozarks. I also have a huge Ozark cookbook collection. Most of that's not really good information for contemporary cooking. But it sent me down this path that led me to what I had just shared before, where I started looking at archives. Because I thought, wouldn't it actually be more interesting to tell the story of people who aren't really known historically, or who've been lost to time, and read a letter of maybe a young man who's writing back to his mom in Boston. I'm thinking of a specific letter, where he wrote his mom and said, I'm okay, I made it. And in the letter, these aren't movies, this is survival. So he says, Mom, I killed a deer on the first day. I met the neighbors on the homestead. I'm going to be okay. And so what we're able to do then is create dishes and a narrative and a story that tell the history of the Ozarks through those three cultures, and do it in a way that's rooted in these historic documents. So that's the interest, because I knew that no one had ever done Ozark cooking. If you Google what is Ozark food, Ozark cuisine right now, a lot of articles on me, and one article from Vice.com from about 15 years ago which says why you don't know about Ozark cuisine. And it talks about isolationism and racism. And I thought, well, let's have a more complete, a fair story being shared. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to be gentle pulling this pork up. I might let it sit a little longer. I don't want to rip off the beautiful browning that we're getting. Guessing the timer on the cornbread's getting kind of close here. All right, can you see that? That's kind of pretty. I just poached this young high school student from St. Louis to the national culinary competition, and she was the only person that had to do the most boring menu. Pan-seared chicken breast, rice pilaf, garden salad. And she's from the north side of St. Louis. That was not quite the menu that she wanted to do. But I taught her how to cure or brine the chicken within the 1 hour. When you do your pork, salt it way before. Don't wait until it's going in the pan like this. This was only for a time crunch. I would have done it 3-4 hours ago and let that salt go in. It pulls the moisture out, seasons the food better.
May I ask a question?
Please.
I saw no oil in that pan. Did you put oil in that pan?
In this pan? Yeah, I was fast.
Okay.
You gotta watch me. I'm super fast.
And yet you were still a little bit worried about sticking.
So, for me, if the oil's in there, as soon as you get the ripples, then the meat can go in. If you put it in before the ripples, there's a very good chance it's gonna stick. Sticking's not the end of the world. And at home, I would be in a cast iron because I like the way the heat works on cast irons a little bit better. In this pan, there's a little bit of stick on that first turn, but it's coming right off. Yeah, I mean, look at that, it's sliding now. And in fact, the pan's a little too.
I have another question.
Yeah, please.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing all this history with us. I was just wondering how you feel the ability to share your creativity in your cooking when you're so focused on the history of it.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate to have a great staff right now because to me, I don't think my customers want to hear this, but to me, the stories and the research and the social justice work we do is far more important than the food. This is not something I would serve at the restaurant. This is too common. My rule is if you can make it at home, I don't want to serve you that because I can never compete with that. I don't want to serve you anything that grandma might have made because I can't compete against the memory of grandma. But the stories and the research that we're doing, it's the first time most of it's been done. And I know this, is Brooks Blevins in the room? I haven't seen him, I know he's here. He's like the seminal Ozark cultural researcher. And he and I have worked together for 5 years now, and I texted him once with all these food questions. And he said, I don't know, and here's the thing, I'm not a foodie, I've never really cared about food, and no one has done this work before. He said, because he said I would know, because if anyone would have done it, it would have been me, and I haven't, and it hasn't been done. And so, I do have a doctorate. I have zero interest in publishing. People are always asking about books. I don't want to do a book. And I think the idea of putting a plate of food out in front of people is a much better way of teaching history. I don't know about the rest of y'all, I did not enjoy history in high school or college. Dates and wars and generals and what good is that besides passing the test? I know there's value to it, but it didn't interest me. And so I like doing it this way where I can engage people in a way that they enjoy. And you know what? If they don't want to pick up the history, they just want to eat a good meal, that's okay too. So just so you know, what I'm doing the chefing method here. At home, use a thermometer, please. Don't make yourself sick from undercooking the pork. And remember, if you didn't catch it a few years ago, they lowered the cook temp on pork. So now we don't have to cook it into oblivion. So I'm doing the touch test. For those of you who don't know, you go in the center and you'll feel it. There's a point where it'll go from squishy to a little bit of resistance. The more it cooks, the muscle fibers are tightening up, the moisture's coming out, it's going to get stiffer, it's more cooked, and also not as good. Alright? We're close on this. Yes? Yes?
You mentioned sorghum as a grain earlier in your gluten-free mix, and
Yeah.
I just wondered how much you use sorghum as a grain and what you use it for.
Whenever I introduce sorghum flour, we were talking acorn flour, but sorghum flour too. We're doing sorghum pita bread right now at the restaurant, and what we always do is we start 25%. almost every recipe can handle that. And then the next round we'll do 30, 35, depending on how it reacts, and just see how far we can go. And when we get to the point that the texture's not enjoyable anymore, because it's heavier, then we stop and back off. But it is an experiment, because even if I were to give you my recipe, let's say for something that is using all-purpose, and I say, well, 25%. If you use a different all-purpose, because we use a locally milled, organic, you know, it's going to be different protein percentages than what you might use, which might be a Bob's Red Mill or a Gold's Mill. So it really is play around with it. The key is getting your acorn flour, right? Okay, this is there. I'm going to pull it, and I get a good meat. Yes, food safety people, I know what I'm doing. I know we are all going to die. Don't eat this. I know you said you're going to eat it. She came in with a hoagie roll and slaw, and what you said that was Carolina white barbecue sauce. I don't know. I'm like, you're at the wrong festival. And she said she's taking this and putting it on the bun. It's on raw meat right now. She also said she's vegan, so I don't know what she's doing. All right, question.
Could you sort of explain a little bit more about the history of sorghum and the Ozarks?
History of sorghum?
Sorghum and mixed with the Ozarks.
Yeah, so sorghum is an introduced plant, and it comes from the African continent. And let me tell you about another project that we do at the restaurant. This helps explain it. So we... Can you see it? And can you give me a plate for us to plate up? Thank you. Guys, you're not allowed to eat it, but it'll be down there on the table. So we do a lot of inventory work. Because how do I find out what was being eaten at a time when foodies and social media didn't exist? Well, thank you. I find inventories. How do I find that? I look at Recorder of Deeds offices, I look at Secretary of State records. Really what happens is I find a business that I'm interested in. In this case, for your question, I saw an ad in the City Directory of St. Louis from 1841. They used to do little phone books with ads, and it said, Benjamin Reed Seed Store. Cool. I go to the Secretary of State, Google search Benjamin Reed, I find when he died. I'm so sorry he passed. However, when he dies, his estate gets documented as a legal document. They were much more anal retentive than we are today, because the level of detail that I see in these records is staggering. For him, he's got his personal effects, but then they documented the seed store. The seed store didn't just say 75 pounds of seeds. Every single type of seed and the volume at the point that he died. We now have 3 seed stores that we've done that with, 1841, 1847, 1863. So I have 3 snapshots of what was being sold. And then the question is, the things that aren't around anymore, why? That's another story. If someone wants, I can talk about that. But sorghum was on that 1841 list. So we know as early as 1841, they were planting sorghum in the Ozarks. And was it before? Probably. And will I find another inventory? Almost certainly. Because most of my work has been through the major databases, which are in the cities, even though it covers the state. But if I get down to some of the historical societies in some of the smaller counties, or I haven't even done the seed work in Arkansas, I'm sure we can find some older stuff. Because seed stores would have gone back to about 1815, 1820. Yeah, so that's as much as I know about, but that's pretty darn good, actually. Yeah. I'm going to plate this up so you guys can see it. We've rested this, and please, I can still handle questions. I like to let my meat rest about 10 minutes. We're going to go a little fast on this. We're going to pull the raw pork off my knife. My team at the restaurant would be dying right now. And, oh, yeah, but look how good I am. So I don't know if you can see, just a touch of pink, lots of moisture in there. Yeah, whew, that's good. 'Cause I don't cook the meat at the restaurant, I'm the pastry chef. So this is a crapshoot whether it's actually gonna work. It wasn't. She said I have it clean, so I must know what I'm doing. All right, so there's our pork. Looking way better than I expected it to. Collard greens. Yeah, I'm just going for it. We just can't let anyone eat this stuff. So here's the collard greens. Drain them off. But people who don't like collard greens, you just need to put some spice and some sweetness in there, and you'll like collard greens. And then really what matters to me is this guy. I don't want to ruin that on this cutting board, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this over. You can tell I'm the pastry guy. I'm like, I don't care about the pork. But the cornbread, don't mess up the cornbread. I'm going to put gloves on, which I brought out to handle the pork earlier. I was prepared. It was the questions. We're going to blame the questions.
In your research, what kind of pastries did you find from the very vintage Ozarks?
That's fun. So, first off, when I do the thin bread, if we did this pan right, it's going to fall right out. Did y'all see how light that was, by the way, in screening? Hey, can you give me a knife so I want to eat this. I don't mind ruining that. I don't need that. I want this. Hey, yeah. The whole point of today. So, ask it again. I got distracted by sugar.
In your research, what pastries did you find in the very vintage Ozarks?
So we don't often cook with recipes. There's very few recipes. But the ones we do start after 1841. If you can tell me why 1841 I start seeing recipes in the documentation, you'll get a pork juice-free cornbread. What is it? Oh, that's a good answer. That's more educated than I actually am, though. And so, I don't want to give this up. So the reason is, that was when baking powder first was introduced as a commercial product. It existed before, but that's when the label goes on. And when the label goes on and someone's trying to make money off of it, they have to tell you how to use it. And so, the history of cornbread, if we go back, it starts as corn pone. Has anyone had corn pone? That's corn mush fried in pork fat, typically in a cast iron, no leavener. Once we have leavener, now we have cornbread, hush puppies, and all the other, and corn dogs. They came much later, but that's in the same vein. Okay, I want you to answer that one question. It's so light and fluffy, crisp edge. Any other questions as I cut this up?
I have a question. All kidding aside, are you saying the risk of contamination from raw meat is negligible?
On what?
I said, all kidding aside,
Yeah.
are you saying the risk of contamination from raw meat is negligible?
No, not at all. No, yeah, not at all. I'm saying the rule from the Park Service anyways, we can't serve food, and I handle that pork way inappropriately, so it's a good thing we're not going to enjoy that pork or anything that has been around it.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I've never had a food poisoning case in my life. So this is the sorghum butter, and just gonna put some of that on, let it drip its way down, and this is a perfect Saturday afternoon dinner.
Chef, a quick question.
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank
Where I grew up, I think they grow a lot of sorghum, but they call it Milo. M-I-L-O.
Milo? You know, that's interesting. Is it related then to the breakfast drink Milo?
I mean, I can obviously Google it. I was just curious.
Yeah, I've never heard that. Yeah.
Well, this was in Nebraska.
So it could be a regional difference too. Yeah. We still have time for a couple of questions, I think. I'm going to move this over. 3 smells. No pork.
up in St. Louis, you're talking about kind of a pretty specific clientele who you're hoping to have come to your restaurant. Do they have preconceived ideas of what Ozarks means that you kind of have to navigate with them, or are they just more looking for the food and I'll cook with whatever? And
I get a lot of foodies because, foodies. And then I think it's their former. So people are always walking out, so you're going to serve us possum? That is a part of the Ozarks, sure. But no, I'm not going to serve you possum, except one time I did. We did a dinner fairly recently because we just got tired of hearing that joke all the time. And so our first course, are you ready for this? The first course was groundhog thaw. And then I did possum pie. And when I introduced it as possum pie, everyone just laughed. They thought I was joking. And they saw I wasn't laughing because it was possum pie. And then we did raccoon ragout. In French, a beaver is a castor. So we did castor à la pastor. That was about the point someone said, so how did you come up with these dishes? And someone blurted out, it has to have alliteration or rhyme. Which is true, we were just goofing around. And then the last thing we served was a dessert called a pigeon pastilla. It's a Moroccan dessert with ground, normally chicken, I think, and we were doing pigeon. And then our entree was venison, and we were disappointed, like, it's just hunted venison. So no, we normally don't do that, but that's absolutely a huge part of the history of the Ozarks.
I was told we are out of time.
We are out of time.
But thank you very much.
Thanks for bearing with me, guys.